Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about mediocre software engineers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how do mediocre software engineers try to cover their tracks? Well, they usually don't, because a mediocre software developer is per definition the norm. I'm guessing that what you're trying to say is that how do bad software engineers try to cover their tracks? And I can give you an insight into that. I think I've covered that in a few videos, but I think it's also worth mentioning, guys, that this idea that you have to be the best of the best is really only something that is being said, and let me try to break it down a little bit to you why this is and why it's going on. Guys, the vast majority of people do not have the necessary skills to make it as a software developer, and that's mostly because software engineering or programming it's a complicated thing to learn. It's not something that you're going to do without a lot of practice. It's statistically it's going to take you 1 to 5 years to get really good at it. That's the sort of investment that you can sort of think about, and that immediately sort of brings us into, all right, so if you've made it and now you're actually in the industry and you can actually produce software, the only thing that matters to the companies at the end of the day is, can you meet the expectations of the company? The reason why there's such a hype around rockstar developers and super programmers and so forth has more to do with your own idea of what such a person looks like. Because when you look at, say, the tech talks and you look at like people making presentations and so forth, guys, that is a fraction. It's not even 1% of the total industry of people who go and do those really amazing tech talks. And by the by, guys, the vast majority of people who do tech talks are not necessarily super geniuses. They have a passion, they show things off. You will find that out as your skills grow. You will start to see more and more of repetition and people sort of just repeating the same knowledge that most people probably know if they follow along and keep track of what's trending and so forth. And then the other part is that you have all these bloggers and media peer personalities who make a lot of content and so forth. And again, guys, that is something that there is a fraction of those people who are doing things that most companies or most people would consider like rockstar levels work, where you might be creating an open source project that has a fair amount of usage or that something fairly complicated is going on. But the vast majority of people are not doing that either. The most people who are going on Medium and so forth, they're blogging about their own discoveries. They're blogging about how cool it is to use something that is like everybody needs to do it to a certain extent. It's just that they are sharing their findings, if that makes sense. I mean, if you look at my little YouTube video here, my videos here, guys, based on the content that I'm providing you, there is no way that you can tell if I actually know any of the stuff that I'm talking about. Well, okay, I will give you that. If you have been in the industry, and I'm not saying that you agree with everything that I say, absolutely not, because I'm not like a super senior or super developer or anything like that. But you should be able to identify some commonalities, I hope, between the things that I'm telling you and if you're doing your own work. But I am not trying to convince you that I am a superstar or rockstar, etc., because the people who are doing that is usually the sort of people who are trying to sell you either beginner content or something like that. They're running a business. And then if you combine that with the fact that the industry, of course, wants rockstar developers, they want the best of the best, because they in turn, of course, get inspired by these by the really successful companies such as, say, Google and so forth, who have some of the best engineers who are making all of these cool innovative projects. So of course they want the best of the best, but the reality is that they're not going to get the best of the best on average. They have no way of doing it, and the reason being very simply because you cannot recruit by traditional means the best of the best, because the best of the best go to where they go to where they want to go. And so the average software company hires mediocre software developers, and here's the other part of it. They don't actually on average know what a really truly gifted software developer looks like. I know that for a fact because I've been both on the hiring committee for a lot of the companies around that I work with, and I've been part of the hiring process. And I know who works in the average IT company, guys. I also know that even at the really large, like really prestigious companies, they have the same sort of issues. They are trying to get the best of the best, but you can't build an entire you can't build on just the best of the best. So being mediocre is, as I said, it's the norm. It's really down to your own, usually it's down to people's own insecurity, that because you feel like there's this competition going on between you and the other people in the team, like who is the smartest person, etc., because humans are humans, and in anything where you can compare yourself to other people, most people will. So with that said, I want you to understand that mediocrity is not a bad thing. It is most people are mediocre, and I challenge you to define what a rockstar developer is, like to a point where it's actually going to encapsulate an actual person. I have met people that I would call the best of the best, and there is no way for me to point and say this is exactly the reason why I feel like these are the best of the best, or so forth and so forth. And I can also tell you guys, after many years now, I can count on my 5 fingers how many people I have met who I would put at the level where they are capable of doing basically anything, I would say. But what usually happens is when people who are not so good at software engineering, how they quote unquote cover their tracks, is that they don't make it for a very long time, because you can't really, it's very difficult to cover your tracks unless you are in a company where the team is either very forgiving, they're working completely, if they're in a situation where nobody can really evaluate their skill, then they can absolutely cover their tracks, because there's no transparency into the work, which brings me back to what I was saying earlier. Most companies don't actually know what a good software developer looks like. So if they meet requirements, which is one of the reasons why I say front end is usually very poorly made, because as long as it looks right, it does not matter what the code looks like, because the people who are doing the evaluation are non-technical people. They don't know how to tell if you're good or bad, usually, as long as you pass their whatever test they have. And so covering your tracks is as easy as just delivering value. It doesn't matter if you're basically just producing legacy code non-stop. If you're in a team, on the other hand, usually what happens is that they pick, as I like to say, they pick the simplest stories. They make up excuses why things take longer than they should, etc. Like they produce very little, and they pick things that are, as I said, very comfortable for them to work usually on. That's how they try to cover it. And of course, any opportunity that they have to hide in the crowd, as I like to say, is something that they will usually jump on. In other words, trying to asking for help is a very good thing, I think, but there's a difference between asking for help and very overtly not knowing how to do anything, and basically trying to hide that fact by always having your coworkers help you out with absolutely everything. Because there is a fine balance. I mean, usually when you first start out, you need a lot of help with absolutely everything, but it gets to a point where I can give you an example. I've worked with developers who have over 10 years of work experience, but they can barely produce anything by themselves, even things that they would necessarily actually have to be able to do, because the reality is that you might need help with some stuff, but if you need help with absolutely everything all the time, it's not sustainable to keep you around. So what I want you to take away from this is that, number one, guys, mediocrity, guys, you don't have to think, this is not the Olympics. You're not trying to become like it is difficult to be a software developer, for sure, but it's not something that is, it's not a performance sport, if that makes sense. You're not trying to become like a football star or like a Olympic athlete or something like that. It's a job, and most people are good enough at this job so that they can can do the work. And I can tell you that I work with people like that every single day. They ship software just as everybody else. They're not going to be the people who are going to invent the next super project or open source project or anything like that. They're not going to, guaranteed. But they can do the work for the company, because usually you're not sitting down and being asked to invent the next search engine or like the next Amazon or whatever it might be. The companies have a need. They want you to build something for them, and as long as you can do that, you're good. And the hype around being a rock star and so forth comes mostly from the fact that people are trying. It's very trendy to be a software developer, so we try to hype it up as much as possible, and people who want to sell their content are usually pushing one agenda. The companies themselves are also pushing an agenda because they want to hire the best of the best and so forth. But the reality is that what I call the best of the best, they usually don't work for the, well, they do. I'm just saying that it's very unlikely that the way that people are doing things, they're going to quote unquote recruit the best of the best. What you're going to do is to, if you get really lucky, one of the best will just apply to your company because it seems interesting. But I can tell you that on average, guys, there might be, like I said, a handful of the quote-unquote best of the best in any given region in a company. It's almost impossible to get one of those really amazing super software developers. So most people are just average, but we hype it up, we build it up to things that it's not. And for the ones who are usually not so good, as I said, they're usually very full of excuses. They're usually very good at picking simple tasks. They are also very good at trying to, in any way they can, mitigate the way that someone can evaluate them. In other words, try to pair up with people, try to work like on projects that nobody really cares about, or like their boss isn't going to check in or so forth, or their boss can't really check in. And sometimes this works. I've worked in companies where I knew for a fact that this person can't actually code at all, but they've been working there for quite some time, and as long as the company doesn't have any other expectations on them, they can just continue doing whatever they're doing. So that's usually how it goes. Have a great day.